Hey guys,
Hi,
I'm Lexi,
I'm Danny.
and this is Girl Preach.
Girl preach.
We are back once again to
Yes.
talk to you guys and to conversate
Yeah.
with each other.
So last week we finished James,
Yeah.
right? Yes. It's been a week or two since we've actually recorded. So I think we finished James. We wrapped up James in our last podcast. So now we are on to something new.
And I might be biased, but I think the last few podcasts that we put out have really good meat in it.
Yes.
And just good stuff to listen to.
Yeah.
So hopefully you guys get a lot out of it.
Yeah, stick with us. We're we're gradually getting there and getting the hang of talking the camera and the mic and yeah.
And slowing down our words and not talking over each other.
I don't know if I'm getting there. But we're trying.
We're gonna say we are.
Right. We're trying.
So this is just a podcast where we want to come together and have conversations about things that are happening in the world or videos that we maybe see online. We did a study through James. It's kind of just throwing a bunch of mixes in there, but
just whatever we feel like has been presented to us, whether, by God or we see something interesting that's like, oh, that's a good topic. We just want to bring our conversations to you guys.
Yeah. So today I didn't send this today. I sent Danielle a video maybe 2 weeks ago that she didn't watch. No,
I watched it today.
We send so many videos back and forth that sometimes they fall through the cracks. But I sent her a video that was talking about short-term missions, and both of us have been on short-term missions. I would say that we were both pretty pro short-term missions.
Yeah.
But it was an interesting video to watch this girl's take on short-term missions. So we wanted to dive into missions today.
Yeah. So we're just gonna talk about missions.
Yeah.
Yeah, why don't you kick us off, Lex?
Yeah. So the video that I sent you, which she did finally watch, maybe a minute before we pushed record, but in the video, the girl was kind of talking about the harm that short-term missions does.
Yeah.
So I thought maybe digging into the harm that there actually is, because if there's harm happening in our churches, then obviously that would leak over to missions as well. And just maybe some of the harm that's coming out of missions.
Yeah.
That we're doing right now.
Okay.
Or what are your thoughts? I don't know.
So on short-term missions, okay. Oh goodness. I'm trying to collect all my thoughts here since I just watched the video, but you guys are gonna get my raw first impression unfiltered, so I might be later. I don't know. But anyway. I can see her points. So in this video she talks about how first of all, if you have no skill set and you're going and you're building houses in Africa, they're probably gonna have to hire construction workers to come and fix your work. Two, you're loving on these kids in these orphanages, and you're telling them about Jesus, and then you're leaving, and they're associating God with abandonment because you usually don't stay in contact. It's rare that you do. I feel like most people do. So those were what her two big points.
Yeah.
For the most part, I can see pros and cons to short-term missions. I've been on quite a few overseas short-term mission trips through high school and college. And I would say most of the people going, at least in my experience, always went with the mindset of they wanted to do good, they wanted to tell people about God, they wanted to help people who needed it, they wanted to help clean up or, do whatever. But 9 times out of 10, it ended up changing you more. It affected you more than you affected them, if that makes sense. In my experience. I can see pros to it too. I do see some pros. I don't know. Yeah. It's kind of a toss-up, I guess.
I think I agree. And that was one of the points you made. You should pray about it because if you're going for you, then that's a whole different thing.
Right.
And I even watched a video of hers later, which I don't think I sent to you, but she was kind of making that same point of it's not about you. It's not even a mission trip. It's more of a vacation kind of thing. And I do see that in a lot of things. And I was kind of thinking because when we do short-term missions trips, the vast majority of them are high school students or college students, super young people going. And that's not to say that you can't like spend a month teaching them these skills that they do need to go and maybe be more beneficial in that way. But also not too many adults are wanting to go because they have jobs and kids, they have families and stuff. They can't just get away for a week. So the burden of it has fallen to the younger generation. And I think that short-term missions are good and they're needed. I think that we just maybe need to find a way to do them better to not hurt.
More effectively,
For example, I think the reason why I'm so pro short-term missions is because I've seen them done well through the ones that most of the ones that I've gone on.
Yeah.
And what it is it's not so much as a missions for the community as it is a missions for the local churches.
Yes.
Or people who are already there doing the work and coming alongside them to maybe help pick up some things that are that they can't do right now. And I think that's what's important is coming alongside a ministry that's already locally based there, because then it's not you're coming in, you're these kids this whole world for a moment and then you're leaving. You're coming in alongside somebody who's already doing the work and you're taking a little bit of the burden off of them for a moment and helping them have a moment.
Right. Yeah. So like when you say that, like it reminds me of like when I went on my short-term trip to South Korea. And there was a church that we were working with that was part of our denomination, well, the denomination that sent us. And we went and we worked there, and like we tried to do English schools, we tried to do, outreaches and things like that. But we were the first team that had ever, like, college team or really any team that had ever been sent from the States to that church. And it was hard. And no one really showed up. No one really came to any of our events. It was very discouraging because I had been part of this organization for a while and they had sent me to Japan. They had sent me to Panama. I'd gone to all these other places with them and we would do these outreaches and these like 1 day VBSs or, whatever to like reach different people in the community for the church, like to let the community know, hey, this church is here, and we would have huge like turnouts. And this time we didn't, and I was just so discouraged. But I was praying and I was reading my Bible and talking to some of the other teammates, and I forget who said it, but it was like, maybe we weren't here to reach out to the community. Maybe we were just here to be an encouragement to the pastor, to the church itself. And so we kind of turned our focus from like outward to like inward. Like, how can we uplift this community, like this church, And so I think like you just have to like figure out what your goal is when you're going. Like you were saying. So I don't know.
Yeah, my mind kind of goes to when we went to Brazil with that same organization. Just the fact that the church that we were helping was an outside church in somebody's backyard, and like just the fact that tightening their pews was just something that was simple that we could do, or like organization, or just blessing them. Like, didn't we spend money to buy like paneling for? We didn't put it together, but I think we bought supplies so that they could do a roof or something like that. But just because
we always try, like I know with that organization, they would always have us raise extra money. That way we could leave like a gift, like for that church or like whatever that need was.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously there's a lot that we couldn't do there, but whenever you're running a full-time ministry and you don't always have all the people you need all the time, and small things do slip through the cracks. So having people come in to
do the
extra work, that does make a difference, and it does uplift and encourage people. And even whenever you're fighting this dark battle by yourself, having a group come in to be like, hey, we're going to fight this with you right now, that does wonders for people.
It really does, yeah. And like you have an interesting perspective because you've been on both sides of that. Like you have been the short-term missionary going, but you've also been on the receiving end of having short-term teams come in and work with your ministry. So I don't know, like you have an interesting perspective. Like I don't have that perspective. I've just always been going. I've never received anyone.
Yeah. Yeah. I know, because fun fact, I literally got back 2 days ago from a short-term missions trip with our local church that we go to. Our youth group went out to Arizona, which is where I was the last 3 years.
It's crazy.
I know. But even like watching that, the very first year we went to Arizona, we were solely there helping with the ministry that I was a part of. We helped them fix their yard or weed or paint or just whatever they needed for their ministry. And I think, and the youth pastor would say this too from here, our whole goal this whole time was we wanted to be more community based, but we didn't have that relationship with the community yet. And so we did that our first year where we were just so focused inside the ministry. And then the second year we went, it was still more focused inside the ministry, but we were doing stuff at the church. We were trying to get farther out. But this last year that we went, because I had already been there for so long, I was able to like express what we really wanted to do this time. And so our connection there, she was able to get people from the community to sign up for us to come out and do yard work. And it was a bunch of church members who signed up because she took it to the church.
Yeah.
So we were still like within the church this time. But as we were out there, like hoeing the fields or doing whatever the church asked us to do, people were literally stopping to be like, hey, what are you guys doing here? And we would tell them, and they'd be like, well, if you guys have time, we need this done. So we were able to do extra projects for these other people who weren't a part of the church. I think one of the people that we did, like all we did was like pick up trash in their yard because the wind is so bad up there and it was blowing stuff in. And she was telling us, she's like, my son and his girlfriend, they don't have time to do it because of all of the dances happening right now. And we obviously don't go and we don't participate in any dances. Even when I lived there, we were very strict, like, we aren't a part of this because we never wanted to confuse the kids to say that it's okay to still worship these things and be a Christian. So our ministry was always split. But I was thinking, like a lot of people would come in and be like, I don't want to do this work because they're just wasting their time over here at the stands. But we were called to serve. And the Bible doesn't say just serve Christians, it's just serve your community. And I think by being those people who are like, yes, we will 100% come over here and pick up your trash, it was just kind of like a moment for people to see like we're serious in what we're doing. And I think that next year when we go, it's going to be even better because we're getting to get that community involvement and we're slowly getting to build on that. And I think sometimes that's what short-term missions are lacking too, is just that continuation of like going and helping and serving and being something that shows up.
Because I feel like most people, like when they go, they're like, oh, I've gone here, like let me go here, like it's not a continual, like I'm gonna go back next summer, I'm gonna go back when I'm in 2 years, whatever. Like there's not that consistency. And I think that especially like if you're looking to witness, you have to have that consistency because you have to build a relationship with these people, whether it's, on the reservation or if it's in Brazil, like you have to have some type of relationship where you can like effectively witness to people.
Yeah.
And so I think like to kind of answer the original question, like, short-term missions and stuff, I think it's all about like your intentions. Like what are your intentions going in? What are your expectations going in? Are you going to go to this village or this community and just expect to, have a revival like Billy Graham style and have like, tons of people saved and people who have never heard the name of Jesus, like, become saved? Like, are you going in with that expectation or are you going in with just whatever I can do? However I can help, whether that's on the very minimalist level or on like a huge level, So I think it's kind of like, it just varies, I guess, from trip to trip and what you're doing there.
Yeah, and it's dangerous. If you go in with the Billy Graham revival settings, like, who's going to be there to disciple these people after you leave? You can't go and be like, hey, love Jesus, change your ways, do all of these things, and then come back out and be like, okay, but do it on your own because nobody's going to be there.
And
to
that's why
help
it's so
you.
important to like work alongside like whatever church or group like you're going with, like find someone. Usually, I would say like if you're going to another country or somewhere foreign, like you probably have contacts like they're waiting for you, but like it's important to go and work with them and side like kind of let them take the lead, you know, and you just be there to offer whatever help, you know. And I know like when we went to Japan and stuff, I felt like we were kind of used as like an attraction, like a circus attraction almost. Like we have Americans come speak English and people would come and like be so excited to speak English and like learn and things like that. And like that's fine. Like God used me however he needs me.
Yeah.
There was this one girl on our team and we were like in I forget the part of Japan that we were in, but it was like the northernmost island. And they all have like dark hair, you know, these little Japanese kids at school, and like they're outside and we're walking down the street, and one girl on my team had like I'm talking like Reba McEntire color, like curly and curly, like red hair, and all these little kids come out and they're like Ginger, screaming at. She was like me. I'm like they're not talking to me. But they were so excited to see her. And so it was like anytime people would see her, like they would gravitate towards her. And so it was just kind of like, oh, here's a flyer. Come to like church, you know, in a night or two and have a hot dog, you know, type of thing. And like that was fine. Like just Lord use me however you need to get me.
Whether it be my hair, my nationality, whatever it is, I'm here. Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's important. Because so I was watching more videos, just trying to get a grasp of other people's views on it.
Yeah.
And there was one video that came up, and she was like, I went on all these mission trips, but really all it was like unpaid manual labor. And like she was mad about it. And like, the thing is that we're supposed to be serving. Like when we took these kids to Arizona, we made them work like twice a day in the heat that they're not used to. Like obviously we were like, if you need a break, take a break, like make sure you're drinking water. Like we were protective of them, but we also weren't gonna let them go and just sit around either when we were there to be useful, in the community and helping these because it was mostly elderly people we were helping. Anyways, so I was like, yeah, they're probably mad they didn't get paid too, but I guarantee you ask any one of those kids that went with us,
that's kind of what you signed up for.
They would say that they were excited to do what, like, it was hard that first day, like, because it's a shock, but those kids worked their butts off, and I guarantee you that their attitudes about it are so great. Like, they were a really great church, and that's what you're choosing to do.
Yeah, like, it's not like anyone's forcing you to go. Like, so you can't really complain. Like, you know that you're signing up to go to wherever, point A, point B, to do XYZ. So it's like, how can you be mad when they make you do XYZ? Like, I don't understand that.
And it is hard work. And it's work that they could do themselves, but that's not the point of it. The point of it is to be a blessing to somebody and to help them where they're what they need.
Yeah, and I think like so there's all of that aspect of missions, but I also think that short-term missions is great for the ones who are feeling called to maybe have that specific calling on their life to be in missions in some form or another. When we went to Japan, there was a girl on our team. Her name's Emily, and she now is a full-time missionary in Japan.
Yeah.
And I just think that that's so cool. I was with her the first time she went to Japan. She was on my team. We experienced that together, and now she lives there. She just married a man from there. Yes. And so I don't know, like it was just so cool to like think I got to experience that, and then God called her back to that.
Yeah.
And that's where she is serving her ministry out at. And I don't know, like I think short-term ministry is great for the people that you're serving, but also like God is going to work through you while you're there. You shouldn't go expecting it to be for you, but be open to that because you don't know if God's going to call you to that location or to another location, but you might even confirm it while you're there. Like, yes, I know that this is what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah. Well, I think of Hannah who visited an orphanage in Mexico and she straight up just moved there got married and living her life there. Like there's been so many people throughout my life that I've watched go to these places and just God is like, this is where I want you. This is where I want you to be. And to think like they never would have been there had they not went on that initial trip and heard God say, or like God broke their heart and they just stayed. I went on a trip. It's most of the trips that I have been through are in the US. But on this one particular trip, we had a team and we were up in Minnesota. No, I'm so sorry. We weren't in Minnesota. Um, I wasn't even on this trip. I don't know why I'm saying we. But I've heard this story from other people. But on this trip, we go to these different reservations, and you're supposed to spend the entire month with this team going to these places. Like that's what we're called to do. But there was a girl who I wasn't on the team with her, but she was in Minnesota. It was in Minnesota. She's like, this is where I'm gonna be, and she moved her whole life up there just to stay there and be a part of that. And she's still there today. And I'm just thinking, like, we live in such small communities. Not everybody. Some people live in bigger cities. But still, like, your mindset is just around the place that you're living. And if you're not going out, you're not experiencing other things, you're not seeing how other people live their lives, then you're just stuck in that box your whole life. And I think that short-term missions is a great exposure to be like, hey, these people, they live like this, or we live like this and this isn't okay, or we need to help them, or this is the place that I want to be.
It opens your eyes to more than like just what you have around you on the day to day. And I think that's so important. I full heartedly thought that Chris and I were gonna live in Brazil. Like I really did. Like I thought that that's what God had for us. Like I was convinced of it, but it was not. Maybe it is in the future. I don't know. I would have packed up and moved everything down there like instantly, like had that been the case, but I don't know. Like I just short-term missions has such a special place in my heart. Missions in general just has such a special place in my heart.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, and I think you made a really good point of like just it's not supposed to be about you, but God is still going to grow you in those moments. And one of the things that we did with our students when we went to Arizona is we worked during the day for the community, but in the evenings we were a part of the ministry and we hung out with the youth that was around. And one of the nights it was just one youth kid who came to the hangout, and we were like, hey, who wants to share their testimonies tonight? And we had some of the kids volunteer to do that. And I was telling them, I was like, it's really good for you to learn how to tell your story. And right now, you're in a group that's mostly your peers from back home and one extra student from Arizona, plus the workers out there. But I was like, this is a really great setting for you because there's not as much pressure on you. And I know sometimes it's harder to tell your story when it's people you know. Sometimes there's also a comfort in that. But we had some great students step up that first night who gave their story, their testimony, and some of them like read there really fast. Like you could tell they were nervous, but I was like, you did it. Like you took that first step to share your story, and every time you do it, you're going to be able to like maybe relax a little more. Like I still get nervous standing in front of people talking, but it gets easier and easier the more that you do it, and it's good to take that first step. And because they stood up there and they did that, the rest of our students were like, yeah, we'll do it tomorrow. Like every one of our students shared their story except for one girl, but that's only because she got sick. And the two girls who went the second night, they had explicitly told me, like, I am not ready. I need another year. Like, I'm not. But then after that night, they were like, we're going to do it. And I was just so proud of them because that's such a big step. And that second night, we had more of the students from that ministry there. And so they had a bigger audience, but they still got up there. They did their stories and they took that moment. And I was like, it's important that, yes, this missions isn't about us, but we're going to take this opportunity to grow because no matter what we're doing in ministry, we're supposed to tell our stories and we need to know how.
Anytime that like God puts something in front of you, like you have a decision to make. You can say yes or you can say no. And anytime you say yes, God is going to use that yes to grow you.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's not necessarily for you, like he's calling you to do something like short-term missions that's not about you. You said yes, so he's going to use that to grow you and grow your faith and just in every possible way, honestly, if you allow him to do that. And so,
yeah. Yes, I have traveled with many people who have for sure turned away from the gospel and who probably have the same mindset as a lot of the videos that I was watching. But I think what it really is that they just weren't willing to say yes. It's hard, and they weren't. I think they got hurt not by the ministries, but just by other things that they were in, and that's why they've fallen away. But I fully believe that no matter what, they're going to look back on that time and be like, "Hey, like, I remember doing this, and I remember these moments, and I remember seeing the miracles that God did while I was there."
right.
And it's going to be something that pulls them back.
Yeah. I definitely I agree. There's a lot of people that I went on trips with that are no longer in church, no longer there's some that no longer proclaim to be Christ followers, and I think that there's no way that they can shut out like the things that happen on some of these trips, some of the miracles that we witnessed, and some of the things that we've seen God do. It's there. It's in their mind, like you said. Like it's going to be there forever. Like they can try to push it out, but you can't. Like, and that might be something, like you said, that pulls them again eventually. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
I hope so.
yeah, me too. Me too, because I pray for them all the time. Honestly, like it does break my heart, like to see some people that I just I could see that God was going to do great things through them, and like you just see the enemy fighting just as hard to pull them off track, and it's just
Yeah. I think it's important to know who you're going with. I mean, obviously, if you're going to a church that might be unbiblical to begin with, you're not going to see that your missions trip isn't going to be the best either.
Yeah.
But like, know what you're doing. Like, spend time investing before you go to know like where you're going, who you're working with, what they actually need. Like, don't just bring a bunch of junk that's not needed.
Right.
And to just be able to say, okay, I'm going to be here for you. Like, don't just run into a place and be like, I'm here to work.
Yeah.
I think just knowing all of these things and not relying on your leaders to make all of like these choices is going to help you know whether or not the trip that you're going on is going to be a beneficial trip or a trip that you shouldn't go on. Because I get it. Like, if you're going to build houses somewhere and they have to come down, tear it all up, and refix it, like,
Right.
that's not helping the community.
Right.
That's not beneficial. But we make sure to tell them in Arizona, like, hey, you know that it's going to be teenagers doing this work. Like, make sure that it's something that they can do.
It reminds me one time we went to I went to Ecuador with the college, and there was some great things that happened, but there is a school down there, and it's in the jungle, and it's a Christian school. So they're having us do like manual labor, right? And some of the people there were like for sure skilled to do this. There was some of us, like me, who were not skilled to do this, right? And I mean, we're in the middle of the Amazon rainforest, and it is like a torrential downpour. Like it is raining so hard, and there's people who are like cutting wood, like hauling wood off, like doing really great things. And then there's a couple of us over there digging a ditch for a foundation that they're gonna pour for like a new lunchroom or something. Literally in the middle of a rainfall, like as for every scoop I pushed out, there was like two more scoops there. That was just like to keep me busy. Yeah. That reminded like that's what that reminded me of. What is this for?
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm gonna raise money and buy him a backhoe. I think one of the girls did offer. She was like, we need to get some type of construction thing down here. But yeah, that would have been more effective than me digging that ditch.
Yeah. No, you definitely learn. No, there's one missions trip that it breaks my heart to think about, that I've gone on, and it was to Mexico. We went to an orphanage out there. And it was with our church. Like, we had connections and we went, and our main missions was service project.
Yeah.
Like, this one did have adults. It wasn't just a bunch of kids. I think I was no, there's two of us that were like the youngest people on there. But one of the things we did was like they needed their storm shelter like stairs put in. So like there was a little bit of welding that had to happen. We built some shelves for a bathroom, which like we brought people who knew how to do that.
Yeah.
But then you had me who was like helping do these things. And so one of the things we did was a walk-in freezer. They had the thing built and we were doing the insulation. And the guy who was over that, he did all the things and then he gave me and another girl nail guns to like just nail it up. And such an easy task, but I was wondering like how many nails missed the mark in there? Like did it fall down? Like I had a bruise. Like I was going into something because I had a bruise from it. But like I was just grateful to have people who knew what they were doing because I had the confidence that whatever I did wrong, they would catch. But the reason why that mission trip breaks my heart a little bit is because there was this incident that happened where one of the kids from the orphanage, he I want to say he had fetal alcohol syndrome. So he didn't make the best choices. And he was technically too old to still be in the orphanage, but because of that, he was allowed to stay. But where we were staying, there was one of those little frosted windows in the bathroom over the showers, and we had it open a little bit to let the steam out. But one of the girls was in the shower and she was like, make sure you have your towels on because she's like, I'm pretty sure somebody's standing outside the window. And we went out and sure enough, there was a chair there and like you could see that it had been stepped up. The guys got up there and they were like, you literally couldn't see anything in there, but we still had to address the problem. And so we went to the leader. We were like, hey, this is what happened with one of your students. Like, we want you to be aware of it because we don't know what else he may have done, or if they even knew that he had done stuff like that. And the kids just started crying and they were like, you're never going to come back because this happened. And we told them, we're like, no, we're going to come back. We're going to come back. The next year we didn't go back because there was a thing with the cartel happening at the time. And then our pastor left and things changed. So like we never went back. And I still like my heart breaks over that because it was like we promised those kids that we were going to come back. And
they're gonna think it's because of
and they're gonna think that. And I'm just like I even messaged the pastor. I was like, hey, are we ever going to go back? And he was like, yeah, we are. But he was just getting settled in the church that he had gone to. And there was just no way to get it to work. And I'm just like, I feel horrible for that. And so I can see in situations like that, like, yes, that is heartbreaking for those kids. And as much good as we did in the like helping part, we probably did more damage in the never going back part.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have anything like that, but like I just know that like there's been times specifically like there's this one little place we went to in Ecuador, this little village. I think it was a compassion village actually. But we did like I think it was like a 2 or 3 day like VBS like Bible school type thing for them. And we took snacks and everything and these kids were so hungry, like they were just like wanting like the food and everything. And these little girls had slings like that they would carry around like their baby sisters. And I'm talking like my son's age, so almost 7. So like a 6-year-old, 7-year-old girl taking care of like an infant. And like that was her job during the day was to take care of her siblings. And when we would get there, she would just like like she did complete stranger. She just came up to me, took this baby out of the sling, and just handed me this baby, and that's all I did. I mean, I helped with like the VBS and stuff, but like I was like that baby's mom for that time period, and I absolutely fell in love with those like little girls. And it was so hard for me to leave them, knowing that I'm not ever gonna see them again. And then I was just thinking, like, I'm the one leaving. Like, imagine how they feel and they're still there, you know? And so like I could like I 100% can see that the video, the girl where she's talking about it, like the harm that it can do, like, I 100% can see that too, because if it's breaking my heart, imagine how heartbroken they are. Yeah.
And it has to cause attachment issues,
Yeah.
because some of those kids are so desperate for love that they just cling to you while you're there, and then you're not there again the next day, and then some other group comes in and they cling so hard there, and then they're gonna stop, and they're gonna
Right.
they're gonna push people away more, and
Right.
I definitely see the harm that
Yeah.
does.
Yeah, I think that there's good and there's bad, just like there's good and bad to everything. I think I think that not everyone is called to missions, but most people I feel like could be qualified to go on some sort of short-term mission trip. And I think that with the right organization, with the right church, I think it is a good thing for most Christians to go and most Christ followers to go and experience how other churches work, other organizations are working in the world and carrying out the Great Commission. But it's not everyone's life calling to be in missions, and I don't know.
Yeah. One of the things that she had said in that initial video was, if you're not even doing anything in your own community, what makes you think that you're going to suddenly do all these things in another community? Right. And that was one of the conversations that I had on this last trip we just went on. I was like, I would like to get the youth doing these same types of things that we were doing here out here. Because I remember when we were in the youth group, like we were doing a lot of people's yard works and stuff. And to be fair, like our youth pastor now has a full-time job and he can't put 100% of his energy into doing all of these things.
Right.
But he has a lot of us, like older people who are never leaving the youth group, still in there, who could organize things like this and who could help do these things. And so I think that's one of the things I want to do is start helping out around our community, and not even just with the youth, but our church in general, and getting outside of our walls.
I feel like outreaches are really starting to, no, they haven't started, they have changed a lot, because like you said, when we were in youth group, our outreaches weren't these big orchestrated events. We would go and rake up leaves at like an elderly person's home, and like that elderly person might be a member of the church. The elderly person might be a friend of someone who goes to the church and was like, hey, this lady really needs this. Or this lady really needs firewood. Can you go chop her firewood? Things like that. But I don't see that frequently within any churches, honestly. Like, there was one church that Chris and I worked at, and we worked with the youth, and we would have like outreach projects. We would have church work days, like to do stuff around the church. And then we'd have like work days to go work out like in the community. And we would have not one kid show up. If we had 1 to 2 kids show up, we were excited. Like, and I'm talking, this youth group ran like 80 to 90 kids, and nobody wanted to come help. And to me, I'm like, that's just, I think that is a reflection of how our churches are working nowadays, where it's all me centered, me focused. What can I get out of this? What can it offer me? What can the church do for me? What can the pastor do for me? Instead of what can I do for my church? What can I do for my community? What can I do for people within, my community?
Yeah. I think our youth definitely got that, because out there working, it's definitely, you might be complaining, but like you start to see, like, if I didn't do these things for these little ladies out there who, by the way, were out there doing it with our kids, because those ladies are not messing around. Right. They're hard workers. But it is like you say, like it has to be outward focused and not inward focused. And if you're never given opportunities to work that muscle of stopping inner focus, then you're always going to just be you.
And of course it's uncomfortable, because in our fallen world, in our fallen nature, we are me focused. Like, the whole everything, our society is all about, you do you. It's all about you. And that's just a fallen nature, to be self-centered. But like you said, it's a muscle, and it's a spiritual discipline, I feel like, and you have to continuously work at that, or it's gonna be lazy.
Yeah. Just laziness. No, it reminds me of that story in the Bible, which I'm going to paraphrase, so don't come at me. But it was that worker or that guy who gave three different people a sum of money to protect or to use.
I don't know.
But anyways, like
Yeah.
one of them went out and he multiplied it like 10 times.
Yeah.
And then one multiplied it 5 times, but then one of them hit it. And he was like, the least you could have done was invested or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I think about here. Like your calling might not be going to a whole nother country. It might not be called to go to different states. It might not be called to do these really big works. The least you can do is reach the people in your community. The least that you can do is tell your neighbor about Jesus. The least that you can do is go to work and show people Jesus, you know?
I feel like most people like hear the Great Commission in Matthew and they think overseas. They think reservations. They think to the unchurched, you know? But no, like that Great Commission was not just for the ones being called into ministry. The Great Commission is not just for those being called into the missions field. Like that Great Commission is for everyday Christ followers within their community, within their families, within their friend groups, within their workplaces. Like that's where you carry out the Great Commission. Like, and I feel like so many people push that off, like onto people who are called into full-time missions or full-time ministry. And like, no, like that is for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I see it. I have seen it done, you know?
Yeah. And you can't create disciples if you're not there to disciple them.
Right.
So obviously, like, it needs to be in your community
Yeah.
that you're working and that you're
Right.
spending this time.
And I think a lot of people like use I don't know, and I just from like time in church, like everyone's like, oh well, God doesn't call everyone. No, but you are called to something. And like everyone, like, you know, there's the general calling, which is your calling to be a Christ follower. And then you have your specific callings. Like God sets you apart for different things. You know, God has set you apart to work on the reservation when you were there. God had set Chris and I apart to work in different churches, you know, and he sets us apart for different things, but we're all set apart for something. That doesn't mean that you get to just sit on your butt.
Yeah.
You have to do something.
Yeah. Right. Crazy stuff. Another video that I had watched and it popped up a couple times, but it was basically talking about short-term mission trips or maybe like missions in general. Um, People are associating it with colonization.
Oh.
Yeah, like we're colonizing. And I'm kind of confused about it, about what their intent was behind it, maybe. And I don't know if it's because obviously when you're called to Christ, you have to give things up. Like even the little white people that are going to do this, like when Christianity was brought to Britain or wherever, they had things that they had to give up too. And so I don't know if they're saying it's colonization because in Christ, you know, we die to flesh. We can't worship all these other gods, you know. If they're calling it that because you have to give things up, or if they're saying it like that because it is white people who are going.
Yeah.
For the most part.
I guess it would just depend on like who was like talking about it being colonization. Like was it
It was white people.
It was a white person saying
Yeah.
I don't okay. So I would say just from like my perspective, I feel like within the United States, like there is such a heavy tone on the colonization because you have the history of like what was done to the Native Americans. Like you do see like what was done there. And I think that God gets a bad rap from that because of the people who carried out godless things in the name of God. I think that there's still a lot of Native Americans and just people of color probably who have just been taught that. Like it's been a generational chain passed down from generation to generation of, well, that's
a white man's God.
And I mean, I grew up here, you know, and like it's not like I don't feel like it's like that here necessarily in this particular area of Native America, but I feel like in a lot of other like places, and as you've probably experienced on the reservation, like that is a very real thing.
Mhm.
And I grew up Christian. I'm Native American. I was born into like a Christian, like my grandma was holiness. You know,
Yeah.
like I grew up in that, so that wasn't ever like a thought for me. So I couldn't imagine that it being just a white man's God because I'm a brown girl and he's my God too.
Yeah.
So like that's hard for me to like grasp, but I don't know. Yeah, I would imagine that that's probably where a lot of that comes from, but I think it's just like a misunderstanding. Like, yeah, you're called to give things up when you're called to Christ, but when you're called to Christ, it's not like, oh, I have to give this up. It's like most things you're willing to give up. You're like, this has nothing for me anymore. You know, like you said, like the dances on the reservation and stuff like that. Like once you become, yeah, like yeah, you might be missing your friends and like the FOMO of it, but it's like this worship of other gods does nothing for me anymore. Like I have my God, you know? Like I don't know. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah. I don't even know what I was thinking, but I was just it's like it's an interesting argument, but I don't understand it. Because I get like if you're going to Africa and you're doing ministry there, obviously your life is going to look different than the native people who live there.
Yeah.
And if they're coming to your ministry, then they're going to be exposed to the way that you do things. I don't think it's fair to say that you're colonizing them or.
I think it's out of fear, and I think it's out, like I said, it's out of an ignorance. They don't understand what it means. They don't understand what a white or even another Native American missionary coming in to a reservation or to a place with full of color, like they don't, it's an ignorance almost. And that's, I don't mean that negatively. Like it's just because they've not experienced it. And the only things that they have experienced or they have heard has been negative. And so they have it already in their mind that this is like a bad thing, you know? And so it's, I don't know if that makes sense.
It's definitely hard thing to wrap your mind around, I guess, especially if like nobody's here to tell us like what they exactly meant by that.
Right?
But
I have heard it called that.
Yeah.
I have seen the argument for people going in. And I think, and this is gonna like, I don't know, it might move this down a rabbit hole. When we went to Brazil, we visited different churches within different like cities that were established by the denomination that you and I grew up in, and that the church that we attend is. I'm not that. We've talked about it. But anyway, we visited these churches, and the one thing that like I noticed about these churches was they looked just like the churches here. Like I'm talking like the altars, the pews, the pulpit, the baptism, like everything was like you could copy and paste it somewhere in America and it would not feel out of place. And the times, of the services in the morning, like it was set up like an American church. Not all places, but some of the churches were. And to me, I could see where some of that would look like colonization because you're taking even the things that aren't wrong about someone's culture and changing it to fit the American culture just because it's how we do it. And so, like in Brazil, they're like a nighttime type of culture. Like they like to do, at least there, I'm not going to speak for all of Brazil, but the areas that we were in, they liked to do the um, services of the evening. And there was a lot of churches that were like, well, we do services in the morning, but I'm like, why? And they're like, well, that's just how, when the missionaries came in, they set it up like that. And it's like, that was changing their culture, but for why? Just because. So in those situations, I can definitely see where that would be a little bit like colonization.
Yeah.
Because you're not changing it to be Christ like, you're changing it to be American like. And like, that's wrong.
And there's no reason to hold so tightly to those customs.
Yes.
Because those aren't biblical customs. Like there's nowhere in the Bible that says you have to meet in the mornings every Sunday, in the evenings every Wednesday,
it's like
every
let
Sunday
them have their Bible study in the morning, let them have their huge service, like what we would have on Sunday morning. Let them have that Sunday night. Who cares?
Yeah.
They're meeting together. They're breaking bread and they're having like fellowship. So like
they're doing church.
And like there was some churches that were set up like that. The church that we served in when we went for my overseas apprenticeship for college, it did have like its big service of the evening. I loved it. There was some that were not set up like that. And it just like it broke my heart because I'm like, let them have their culture if it's not contrary to scripture, you know?
Mm-hmm. As long as they're not worshiping somebody other than God, it's okay.
Yeah. As long as they're not breaking anything in here, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So I could see that aspect being colonization because I mean it is. But I don't know. I don't know. But I have seen like the TikTok videos where talking about missionaries going into foreign countries, being colonizers, and it's like, oh, like God is just so great. We just want you guys to like be able to experience him. Like that's all. It's out of most of it is out of love. I can't say in the past, like hundreds of years ago, it was all like motivated out of love and like wanting people to experience God, but like I would say a lot of it nowadays is.
Yeah. I know that for the ministry that I was a part of for 10 years, it was a native ministry, and what they wanted from it was natives to reach natives. And obviously I'm not native, but I have a really big heart. I have a really big heart for natives, and I knew for the longest time that God had called me to native ministry, and that's why I wanted to be such a big part of that ministry. And I would go as an intern for the most part, just to like kind of be their backup, I guess, like fill in the roles so that they didn't have to be taken out of the mission. But like I would stand at the lit table. But it's a really beautiful idea to have your culture reach your culture.
Yeah.
But the reality of it is that's not always going to be the case. Like, and that's not to say that God can't bring other people in who have the heart to reach that too. Because like they're right, like natives are gonna listen to natives before they listen to white people, or people from Africa are gonna listen to people from Africa, depending on which country of Africa it is. But it's a beautiful image, and I wish the world could be like that. But in reality, right now, it is white people who make up the majority of short-term missions and is going, or who's moving to these locations to pick up these jobs. And like I think that because it's white people that people are saying it's colonization.
I could see that. I do think that the days of American missionaries being the predominant is a short-lived. I think, especially like when we're in Korea, like there were so many people that were like, oh, like my cousin or so and so is like a missionary to here, a missionary to there. Like they're sending missionaries to us now, and I'm just like, yo, like we kind of need it over here. We do. Like kind of drowning here.
There is a Korean church on the reservation that I worked on. And there was also Koreans who would travel down to be a part of another church.
Those Koreans are getting it for sure.
They are.
They are sending so
They're like, we're tired of you guys not doing your job.
Wrong.
Yeah. We're gonna do this right.
Honestly, I think that that's so cool. But I think that, like I said, American missionaries being like the predominant force, like on the missions field, is going to be very short lived. I think that we're going to be quickly outnumbered because even like the Brazilians, like when Chris and I were there, and I know you were there with us for a couple weeks of that time, like after you guys left, we went down like south, I think. I don't know. We went somewhere else. And the pastor and his wife that we had stayed with, like they had previously been missionary, like they're Brazilian, had previously been missionaries. It's like Ireland or somewhere like that. And then like I think their son is over there now, and as a missionary. And I just think that that is so stinking cool. I don't know, like it's cool.
It is cool.
But yeah, I think it is beautiful, like what you were saying, like when their cultures are reaching like the same cultures, like Native Americans reaching natives and Africans reaching Africans. Like there's something so beautiful about it, but there's already like that base level trust almost built in, like these are my people type of thing.
Yeah. No, I definitely am for short-term missions. I know that Paul himself, he had missionary journeys.
Yeah.
Is how we divide up the Bible. And I mean, to be fair, his missionary journeys were not as short, like a week or two, like ours are. Like he spent months in a place sometimes. But, like his intent was to like go to these different churches,
help the churches,
and build up the churches, be an encouragement for all of them. And I think that's how I look at missions is I want to go and I want to be an encouragement and I want to come alongside you and help you build your church, but I'm not staying. Yeah. Unless I get a chance to go back to Hopi and then I'm staying.
I could totally be wrong in this, but I want to say, like, we were talking about how, like, missions isn't about us. Like, it's not for what we can do, but, like, God does work through us while we, like, say yes and while we trust Him. Which I will say, some of, like, the funnest, craziest adventures that, like, I've ever had in my life and have been, like, when I have said yes to God. Like, He will lead you places that, like, you never thought that, like, you would ever wind up. And it's not all about the adventure. It's not all about the fun, but, like, it is okay to, like, take it all in while you're there, too.
Yeah.
But I was just thinking, like, how many times, like, in Paul's letters does he talk about how, like, those churches have also, like, encouraged him?
Yeah.
And so it is, like, a mutual thing, I don't know, what is that, like, a symbiotic relationship, like, where the animal, like, helps the fish, but, like, the fish helps the...
Oh, where they live, like, together.
Yes, like, like, the little minnow helps the whale, but the whale also helps the minnow, like, type of thing, And I think that that's such a nerdy, like, example. And I don't know why that popped into my head. But it's true. Like, it's okay to go and, like, get something out of it for yourself as well. But, like, just know that it's not for you.
Expect unbelievers to fill you.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct, yeah.
Because we're a community. Like, as Christ followers, we're a community and we are uplifting each other. And so it is some of the best moments where you get to fellowship with other believers and just be able to sit in that and soak it up and stuff.
And like you were saying, like sharing the testimonies and stuff, like when you sit down and you talk to believers, it doesn't matter if you're in Ecuador, Japan, Korea, Brazil, reservation in Arizona, like it is so, it's not refreshing, but it is refreshing to see that like they have the same hardships that you have as a Christian, to see that like they have the same struggles that you have, and it's not just you in your little area and like your little house that's struggling in these areas. Like Christ followers all over the world are like also dealing with the things that you deal with, and it's you guys are in it together, even though you guys live hundreds of miles apart.
Yeah. One of my favorite memories of the trip we just went on was because I lived in Hopi for 3 years, I got to see the end of one of our students. She's not a student anymore. She actually moved in with us and we were discipling her a little bit, but I wasn't there when she accepted Christ. Like I didn't get to see her from the very start, but I got to see her from the middle. And then she shared while we were there. And just watching her speak and talk to my group from Oklahoma, it just like filled my heart. But then when she was done, because she was super raw with her story and she let herself cry, even though I know she didn't want to.
Yeah.
But I was so proud of her and just like the growth that I had seen in her.
Yeah.
But then she had gone and she sat down, and one of our girls from Oklahoma, she went over to her and she's like, we basically had the same story, and sat and talked with her for a long time. And just because I knew both sides of that, like it just filled my heart because I was like, this is what we want. We want this fellowship. We want people just from different walks of life being like, I know your story because it's my story too. And like, let's talk, because they get to, I don't know.
It's also kind of like interesting because like, of course, not every hardship that like a believer goes through is attacks from the enemy. Like, I don't believe that. Like, some things is just because we live in a fallen world.
Yeah.
But it's also, enemy thinks he's so sly. Yeah. Like, once you start talking to people and you're like, oh, you struggle with this too, and someone else is like, oh, I struggle with this too, or this is hard for me. And it's like, your story's my story. And it's like, he is hitting us all in so many ways that are the same.
Yeah.
He is not tricky. He is not sneaky.
Yeah.
I mean, he is sneaky.
Yeah. But he wants you to keep that in and to
Yeah.
yourself, because then you're struggling and you're alone and you're isolated. And then
Right.
when you bring it out and when you share these stories, you're bringing it to the light, and he no longer has power over that
Right.
anymore, because like you said, he's doing it to all of us,
Yeah.
and we get to be in a community. We might be in a struggling community, but at least we're with each other struggling.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
misery loves company, right?
Right. But yeah, so I think that there are pros and cons. But I think there's a lot more pros that can come out of short-term missions if you are doing it correctly.
Yes.
Yeah. And yeah, just do it correctly. Go with people who are going to build up the local church and not try to run the show.
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
And that's why I wanted to have this conversation,
Yeah.
because I love missions. I think that it's important. I think that we are called to build each other up, to uplift each other, to be with each other. And you can't do that just sitting in your own churches. But there is hurt that comes from it. And if we sit here and we have these conversations, and then
Right.
you grow from it and you're like, okay, because sometimes when you watch a video on TikTok, it almost like shuts you down, like, oh no, I've been doing stuff wrong for so long. And instead of like processing through the things that are being said and like having conversations where you're like, okay, no, like I see their points and they're right in some of it, but there is more to this. And just, yeah, that's why I wanted to have this conversation.
I want to end with my favorite quote about missions. And this was like hammered into us all through. I have my degree in intercultural studies, so missions, like a fancy word for missionary. And this was like hammered into us through a lot of like anthropology courses and just like different classes or whatever. But it's a quote by John Piper, and it just is missions exists because worship does not. And it's like once everyone worships Christ, missions will cease to exist. But like that's the goal of missions, is to, at the end of the day, like we want everyone worshiping God. Like we want everyone to know how great He is.
Yeah. So I know that a lot of people watching, maybe some of you have never been on a missions trip before. Some of you might not have the time for it, but what is the least that you can be doing? A missions trip doesn't have to be to another country,
Right,
or another state. It can literally be your own town.
Yeah, it could be just an outreach, simple outreach within your community. Yeah, it could be anything.
Do something.
Do something. It's better than nothing.
Yeah. Okay, well, we went pretty long on this one, which is funny because we were both like,
we had no notes.
I knew our discussions would be good though.
Yeah. Like when she said missions, like I didn't even know that she had sent me I have my Instagram notifications turned off, and so I didn't see the video until she sat down and asked me about it.
Yeah.
So I went and watched it. But when she said missions, I was like, I'm game. Like my heart is just for missions. Like as should everyone. Like everyone should have missions.
Yeah. And if you have questions like how to start a ministry or missions or something, obviously we don't have all the answers, but we have experience. We have experience, and we would be more than happy to talk with you about it and help you figure out what you want to do.
Yeah.
So yeah,
for sure.
That is our podcast for this week.
Thanks for joining us.
See you guys later.